How's it going, everybody? Thanks for joining us today. I have a special guest. Kevin, can you go ahead and give an introduction as to who you are and who you're with?
Yes, sir. I'm Kevin Williams, formerly with the group Save Ranchland Hills, past battle, but since being involved in this movement, so to speak, the vortex of local politics kind of pulled me into the Midland College bond. So here at Stan Smith's house with Midland Street News Unfiltered, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Kevin, I'm going to get to we'll get to the meat and potatoes here momentarily, but I just want to get a background as to who you are. So, give an introduction, or can you start from the beginning, where you came from, how long you've been in Midland? Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I'm kind of a hybrid. So I'm kind of from Midland, Odessa. Grew up in Odessa, lived in Midland for several years, have a small business over in Midland. So, I've never been one of these people outside of when I got out of high school that really looked at Midland and Odessa much different. I know there's a big rivalry, which is healthy, but the towns are sister cities. They're right there together. So I've never really identified as living in Midland or I'm from Midland, Odessa. So that's kind of the way I've looked at it. Was a member at Ranchland Hills, and then got involved whenever MISD bought the property and subsequently passed their bond. So that was pretty much where I got hooked up. We Even though we lost the fight, uh, I feel like that we still came out on top because I met so many good people that their heart is in the right spot. They're conservative people. They want what's best for the city. And so, the networking that I've met through this effort has really been quite special to me. I've met a lot of really good people.
So, where were you born at?
I was born in Odessa. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so let me ask you this. How have you seen it change the landscape in West Texas? Because I'm gonna be honest, I don't like it. I'm an oil man, I haul oil, I'm a trucker, I made my bones in the West Texas oil fields. But what a lot of people, I kind of see this with the community here. People that want to progress forward and grow the city big and huge, and people like I would say myself, I don't know about you, but man, I'm glad when it's kind of more dead and it's not that much traffic and less accidents on the road. But it's just with the oil town, we're in a crazy kind of situation. So I would say that there is a certain group of people here that some want to progress and some want to just keep it traditional. I said to say this. I don't like really where Midland and Odessa, Texas is where we're headed, to be completely honest. Even though I make money in the oil field, it does bring a lot of uh, uh, vagrants and trash and a lot of illegal activity here. What are your thoughts on the overall direction of where Midland's headed, being here, being born in Odessa, should I say? Go ahead.
Well, it's not good. I've lived here for 64 years, and the core values of the towns are what used to keep people here. The unfortunate thing is Midland and Odessa are not any more or less than what they were 64 years ago. They're just larger versions of what they were in the past. You're not ever going to do anything about the geographical location of it. It's in the middle of a desert. When people look at it, there's really one reason to be here, and that's oil and gas. That supports everything. You've heard it said before, it doesn't matter if you're selling hot dogs on the corner. To some degree, you're in the oil and gas business because as oil and gas grows, so does your business. So it's one of the double-edged swords. It's both a blessing and a curse. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's bad. And that's one of the things that really concerns me is when you look at the growth that this town has gone through over the last 8 to 10 years. The bigger the boom, the bigger the bust, and history repeats itself. And starting out with the $1.4 billion bond for MISD, we are enslaving our children to pay for debt that grown adults want right now. And that's what's so concerning. Getting involved with the Save Ranchland effort, it was very obvious to me, from my personal viewpoint, that there's a group that's got a lot of money, they've got a lot of influence, and they utilize it. They utilize it very well. And so the same playbook that they used to pass the $1.4 billion school bond is getting copied and pasted over to this issue, which is the Midland College $450 million bond. Uh, we've just had to bail out the firefighters retirement fund. MISD is $41 million in debt. They're in the process of liquidating property that they bought years ago. And I think that we're setting ourselves up for a really, really big hard fall eventually.
And I don't have the. I'm looking for the numbers. I haven't. I'm in my numbers over here, but Midland's in debt too. We're in big debt. I forgot who I saw posted, but I mean, we're not really in a good situation. And you're right. What goes up must come down, especially with the oil field. I digress. So I want to get into the Save Ranchland Hills situation. Can you explain to everybody? Because I want to be honest. I think a lot of people were in the dark on that situation. Same thing with this bond. Now they're basically in an off season. They're trying to pass it in Odessa and Midland. It's kind of weird, right? They got two
Mhm.
bonds for these colleges. They're trying to pass it right now. And I made a post on Facebook. I said, why don't they put these up for the voters to vote for during normal election season when people are out voting and it's more, there's more activity, more people are aware. And of course, I know the answer, but people said that this is the way that they sneak them in there. And like you said, the same people that pushed the school bond are pushing the college bond. And I don't want to sit here and name them, but they know who they are. And I think it's pretty
Mhm.
sneaky and snaky, the maneuvers they're utilizing, especially for these things that, in my opinion, is just socialism. If I don't want to spend my money on something, I shouldn't have to. Why should me or my parents, my grandparents, my kids even, why should we be having to foot the bill for training oil field workers or for, stuff that's not my business? I'm a simple man. It's not my business. These bonds are not my business. It has nothing to do with me. Why should I have to be paying with my taxes? Then 30 to 40 years, plus it's over $1 billion with just the college bond with interest. I digress. Point is, a lot of this stuff I think is under the radar, and I think the Save Ranchland Hills situation was under the radar. So, can you please give me an explanation and let me know what happened with Ranchland Hills? Because, like I said, I think a lot of us are in the dark about Ranchland Hills because once I've studied it and you and Stan showed me what happened, it was pretty nefarious the way that they got that property, the city of Midland, and now they're using it for a school when it was designated in the paperwork, right, that it was supposed to be only for a golf course. That right there should be grounds for, no movement whatsoever with the bond. But I digress. Give me a introduction and a layout as far as what happened with Ranchland Hills. What is it? What happened there? Go ahead.
Sure, sure. So we joined there in 2019, so I can kind of speak from that point on. But it was owned by two individuals, and then MISD bought it in executive session. There was a couple of issues for me with that. One was we had a full membership at the time. I don't begrudge anybody trying to do investments and make money on their property or whatever. But at the time that the sale happened, I think the golf course was appraised around $1.9 million. And then MISD went into executive session and agreed to buy it for $9.5 million, uh, planning on passing a school bond and eventually putting a high school there. Um, I did not know anything. I mean, I knew that whenever I joined, the transaction had already happened. And when I asked them about it, they said, "Well, MISD owns it, but there's probably nothing going to happen." They really didn't. They downplayed it a lot. But then after looking into it, there was a couple of things they could have done that would have completely stopped all this back and forth and this argument. I wrote a letter to the superintendent asking about this, and the letter came back. I've still got it, and it said, "Well, the golf club was for sale. It was publicly for sale." Well, I've looked, and I can't find a listing anywhere. Ranchland Hills Golf Course for sale. So evidently, it sounds like MISD knew it was for sale, and the owners knew it was for sale, but that was where it kind of stopped. Uh, to my knowledge, all the members found out that their club sold in the Midland Reporter Telegram, so they didn't have an opportunity to make a bid on it. As a businessman, it seems like if you and I owned something and there were 650 members, and we had an offer from the school district that just if it was nothing more than optics, we would have gone to the members and said, "Look, we've got it for sale. We've got an offer. It's high. This is what it is. But if y'all want to make an offer on it, we were never afforded that luxury. So then, I guess September 27th of this year will be the 2-year mark where I started the Facebook page. I just was curious to see if anybody had the same feelings I did. And last time I checked, I think we've got 1,500 and something people on the Facebook page. It's kind of dropped off a little bit because of recent events. But long story short, we started meeting, we started talking about it, see if there was something that could be done. This golf course has been here for 75 years.
Wow.
I've said it before, it has all the scars of the boom and bust economy that the city of Midland has, and it's not something that you replace in a year or two. And so we got together and collectively, filed FOIA requests on all the transactions, this, that, and the other. Ended up hiring a law firm to represent us on a city ordinance that says that this property must be a golf course. This is kind of the short version, but ended up going to the hearing. We probably spent close to $100,000 on this, and then went to the hearing. I unfortunately was in Fort Myers, Florida, the week of the hearing, so I wasn't able to attend, but Stan and some other people did, and were keeping me abreast of what was going on. We felt real good about it. And then lo and behold, the judge came back, ruled against us with prejudice, which means that we can't refile this again. There's no appeal for it. And so, it looks like, unfortunately, it's the end of a historic golf course and a green space for the people in Midland. And then to add insult to injury, now there's words going around about, the county looking at building a golf course, Hogan putting several $1,000,000 into that golf course. And so it's not a good utilization of money, right? We had a beautiful, fully functioning golf course that had a full membership September 29th, and they shut it down, and now they're bulldozing it up and tearing things down, and simultaneously now we're talking about spending 25-30 million dollars to replace something that nobody's going to get to utilize for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So it was a bad deal all the way around. But like I said, what gave me concern was they'll stick with the same playbook. The same playbook that got that passed, they'll copy and paste onto the next issue.
And it was a historic, I mean, it's like a landmark in Midland. Why would they do that? It just doesn't make any sense. And then now are they going to want to get public assistance or funding from the taxpayer to fund another golf course when they had that one in perfect condition? So let me ask you this, what's the most, unnerving or the thing that really pricked your ears about the Ranchland Hills golf course that made you want to get involved in these other bond situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can tell you without hesitation exactly what it was, Nino. There's no communication between these taxing entities. You know, when we got to talking about this, it was like the city of Midland would not even, or the city of Midland seemed like they were willing, but MISD was not willing to have a discussion with anybody about anything other than what they had planned. And, their kind of fallback on that was, well, we told everybody that this is what was going to happen here, and they did announce it in the paper that they bought Ranchland Hills and planned on putting a high school on there. But after that, all they focused on was passing that proposition, that $1.4 billion. And I even pressed one of the people that was on the advisory committee. I said, another way to take this off the table would have been on the voting ballot where you vote yes or no, where it says pass this $1.4 billion. This will build 2 new high schools. They should have put and will result in the destruction and removal of Ranchland Hills. That way you know exactly what you're voting for. And the response I got to that was, well, that's just too detailed for proposition language. And I'm like, it was a $9.5 million detail, and now it's becoming part of a $1.4 billion detail. I think it warrants a little bit of space on the proposition and for it to be outlined. But it made no mention of, by voting yes, You just knew you were getting schools, but you did not know where the schools were going to be built, and it never did say on there where they were going to be built. So, yeah, back to your kind of got off track there, but back to the thing that drove me nuts the most was we probably showed up. We had 250 people at one of the MISD meetings, and everybody made their 3-minute speeches, and the school board would sit up there and take notes and nod their head. And then we even had a special meeting about Ranchland Hills, to where they all got up there and said, nope, we're going to continue on with what we're going to do. But we never could get, even when we were the agenda, you've got to be on the agenda item for there to be any back and forth conversation between the citizens and the school board. And we could not, even when we were on the agenda, there was never any discussion back and forth. But we had some alternative plans to where the city of Midland could have had both, could have had the new high school and could have saved Ranchland. There's a plot of land over there by the water tower on, I think it's Wadley and Lamesa, where there's some abandoned dog parks and baseball fields, and
Yeah.
we had some momentum to move the school over there, and we had really good momentum. And then all of a sudden, in a 24-hour period, it just stopped. I mean, and the statement that they released was almost like overkill. It's like, we don't even know why we're referring to it as Ranchland Hills, because that's going to be the place for the new high school. And so just the talking between entities, and that's what I want to kind of segue into this Midland College. These taxing entities, whether it be Midland College, the school district, the hospital district, the county, they will all come at the taxpayer like, well, no, this is just about MISD, or this is just about Midland College, or this is just about the hospital district. Most people have one wallet. They don't have a separate wallet for each of these taxing entities, so that argument lays pretty weak with me. It's all coming out of your back pocket, regardless of the taxing entity. And they ought to work better together. They ought to come up with creative solutions together, but they are their own little empires, their own little domains, and they've got their kind of their king and their ruler, and that's just kind of how they operate.
Man, it's very interesting what you're saying about the Ranchland Hill situation, because there's a lot of things to point out about it. I would say this is just very horrible to hear that there's no communication. You go up there to these town hall meetings or with the school board or whatever. I've been to a lot of them. It's like they don't even care. Uh, isn't this our city as a tax-paying citizen? As the citizens of Midland, Texas, don't we have any say-so? It's like they can just, like you said, tax us on, and that's like what Stan says too. How many pockets you want to take out? How much money do you want to take out of all my pockets here? I only got two back pockets. So it's like they
Right.
take our money, they don't take our input, then they kind of are shady with the way they word the bonds, and how they do the voting situation. Right now, they're doing it in the off season with the voting, and it's the worst part about it. Besides losing a historic landmark like the Ranchland Hills golf course, is that it's a similar play. This is the most alarming thing, in my opinion, that they're playing over and over again. They learned a way to, I would say, take property. I don't know how to exactly word this, but they learned a way to finesse the voting situation in order to push these bonds and increase taxes on the citizens of Midland, Texas. Now, let's go to the Midland College bonds. So you got involved with that with Stan, correct? I think it's very interesting and very alarming. Like I said, it's like the playbook. They're using the same play. They're using the same people, the same maneuvers in order to pass these bonds slash taxes. So what do you think overall about the Midland College bond? Are you for it, against it? Give us your general consensus on the bond.
Well, I'm obviously I'm not for it, and I've put this story out there before. I don't, like I said, love oil and gas. It's how I've made my living. How I've put two daughters through college. Uh, you know, the oil and gas industry has been good, and we need to support it, but they also need to support themselves.
Yeah.
Years ago when I went to work, the company that hired me with no experience, trained me, and the only stipulation was when I hired on, they said, if you can't work 80 hours a week, we don't need you. So, ended up staying there for 6 or 7 years. And, here recently through another conversation with one of the younger people, they were like, well, here's the problem. There's too big of a gap in knowledge for companies to hire people and have their own people train them, because there's not that much experienced knowledge left at the oil and gas companies. Well, they've created that themselves, in my opinion, because every time that there's a downturn, they offer these packages for these senior people that have worked there just to get their payroll down. So they flush them out.
Hmm.
Well, you created the gap, so you need to fill the gap. And I don't think it should be on the taxpayer to go train those people to go to work. And, eventually, after years and years of service, the same thing will happen to them. They'll get flushed out of the system. So, oil and gas, there's one of the people that I kind of trained under in my current job. And he says, the first most profitable thing is a well run oil and gas company. The second most profitable thing is a really crappy run oil and gas company. So, oil and gas companies, they do very well. And we're blessed to have them. If it weren't for oil and gas, there wouldn't be anything in Midland, Odessa. I've said it before, lived here my whole life, and I've never met anybody that was just traveling through this area. And this sounds like I'm dumping on Midland, Odessa, which I really am not trying to, but it's the truth. I've never met anybody that was traveling through here and stopped and just thought that this was such a charming, lovely
Yeah.
community with so much to offer that they would just move here. People move here, they make their money, they get out of here, they go back to where they're from. For most people that weren't born here, Midland and Odessa is an acquired taste.
Yeah.
It's not something that, that they're used to. I've had people that have come down and worked with me for weeks out of different areas, and they're like, how do you, you become a product of your environment. As bad as this sounds, if for some reason somebody gets thrown in jail for 30 years, it's pretty jarring probably the first year, but then you settle in and it just becomes part of your environment. I don't want to equate this like we're in jail, but it's, when you look at it, there isn't a lot to do. And now that Ranchland Hills is gone, for me personally, there's even less to do.
Yeah.
So, another reference point. So I'm blessed and fortunate enough to have been to my 40th high school reunion. Okay. We had 780 something people that graduated. Um, there wasn't a ton of people at the last one, but I can't recall anybody besides myself that was still living here. So it's
Wow.
just the natural stuff. People, they're born here, they get their degree, they go to work, they do whatever, and then they move off somewhere else. I've got two daughters that are going to be heading to the Weatherford area. So um, it's just, we've got to put more attention on what would keep people here, and not just get them here to work, but what would keep them here. And it's quality of life issues for me.
That's a good point. And speaking of keeping them here in 30 years in jail, I'm going to ask you this. Do you think that obligating the community to 30 years of debt for something that Midland College wants right now, do you think that that makes any sense whatsoever?
It doesn't. But, one of the unfortunate things, and I think that this is some bleed through from everything else, is I believe the younger generation is comfortable with debt. They don't,
Yeah.
that you turn on the news and the nation's 36 trillion in debt, and Midland Independent School District's $41 million in debt. And it's almost like we're playing with monopoly money. Nobody has the Dave Ramsey plan.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like anymore and I'm not saying we've got a bunch of envelopes at the house with money in it for groceries or clothes or whatever, but uh, they just they're not uncomfortable with debt, and that's scary. It's been said 1,000 times on Dave. The borrower is slave to the lender. And we're just enslaving our kids for stuff that a very affluent group want right
Yeah.
now. And that's what I want to try to drive here is we've got to get people out and vote. We've got to. It
Yes.
doesn't matter if you are in the depths of poverty, you still get a vote. And it means as much as somebody that's got a multi-million-dollar mansion. And that's who it's going to impact the most. To the wealthy, if they pass this and their taxes go up another whatever, $150 a month or $80 a month, it's no big deal. But to that person that is barely hanging on right now, that means a lot. And it just seems like we're letting the good intention of the wealthy drive more people closer to poverty.
And I'm going to say this. I got a couple of points to touch on that, but I'm going to say this. Of course, it's not good for anybody that's poverty stricken or can barely make it to pay any more in taxes. Plus, with the businesses that are going to also absorb this and tax the citizens here. But let's be honest, y'all. That's not my business. I don't want to pay one penny extra to anybody's training for welding or for being a nurse at Midland College. How is that my responsibility as a taxpayer? But speaking of the wealthy, they wanted to spend our money like monopoly money, like paper money. There's actually a video that I recorded. I don't know if you saw it, of me speaking to a transplant from Fresno, California. He's a professor down there at the college. And while they're pushing this, bond on everybody, is he going to be here in 30 years to pay this debt off? I honestly don't think so. Like you said, many people leave Midland. I'm going to be honest. If I could be financially stable to leave and retire somewhere else, I'm going to. I've said it before. Midland, Texas is not a place to retire. Not anymore. Maybe it kind of was, like I said, it's an acquired taste for most locals. Maybe you could retire here, but the way it's going, it's not a place that's really friendly for people that are elderly on fixed incomes or they want to retire. Like you said, they want to sit here and put money into these jobs and jobs and jobs and training for jobs. But what about people like us that live here? They want to hopefully retire here. What about us? You took our golf course away. What are you offering us? All you see is coffee shops, bars, and a 501c3 church entity pop up everywhere. What's all there is here in this town. What is there really for us to do in this city? But again, back to my point. Transplants like the guy from Fresno, the professor me and Stan had the pleasure to talk to, he don't care because he might not be here much longer, or he may not be here for the full 30 to 40 years in the $1 billion plus debt just for this bond alone. So I think you made some great points about people that want to spend our money, and I seen it in person. The college professor that is not even from my city, but he wants to push this debt and this bond that even my daughter and my son are going to have to pay eventually. My son's going to have to pay for it. He just bought a $250,000 house, brand new house, so he's going to be paying for it. He never went to college. One more thing I'm going to add about the bond, and I'm going to ask you if you've ever experienced this in the oil field. I've never run across one person in my 20 years of being in the oil field that said, hey, Midland College trained me to come out here to work. It's always by who you know. If you could pass a drug test, if you have a license, a pulse, grit, determination, those are the things that make an oil fielder basically in West Texas. I've never heard no one tell me that they were trained by Midland College to come work in the oil field, and they keep using that excuse. Have you met anybody from Midland College out in the patch in your career in the oil field?
I haven't, and that's another thing that we've got to acknowledge is that if this does pass, we're going to be training people. We've already kind of outlined ad nauseum, some of the reasons that people want to leave Midland, Odessa. Well, in a lot of cases, this is just one more tool in their tool belt to be able to get out of Midland, to
Yeah.
get out of it physically. They get this training, this education here to where they can go use it someplace else. There's no assurance that because they go to Midland College that they're going to stay here, they're going to support Midland. I would make the opposite argument that a lot of them would probably go to Midland College to get out of Midland or Odessa. So, we can't just present one side of the argument. I know, like I said, I recently saw another podcast of a young lady talking about she was born here and she went to Midland College and she had such a great experience and now she's involved in it. Well, Does it happen? Yeah. Does it happen on a great scale? No. We're taking the outliers and we're indenturing our kids to pay for a 30-year debt based on something that's forecasted right now. With everything that's going on, I just today look, the stock market was up 2,400 points, is down, I don't know, 1,500 yesterday. Oil and gas got down to 56 this morning. Now it's at 62. There's not very much stability here. And so for the towns like Dallas and Fort Worth, and I guess before I wanted to get this out there, I know I've said a lot of negative things about Midland, Odessa. Like I said, it doesn't speak very highly for my intelligence because I'm 64 and I've still been here. So it probably comes off more harsh than it's meant to be. My whole deal is it is what it is, and it's not going to be. It's just going to be bigger or smaller version of what it is. We can't do anything about not having any lakes, rivers, mountains, trees. That's just we can't do anything about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. We ought to make it the best Midland and Odessa that it can be instead of trying to make it a Austin or a Dallas or a Fort Worth or something. We ought to just concentrate and make it the best we can for what we've got to work with. But it's never going to be those towns. Those towns have got the diverse economy that oil and gas doesn't impact them, their tax revenue. That's the scary thing right now with all the uncertainty in the stock market and in commodities and everything else. This seems like the worst time
Yeah.
to pass a bond because there's just everything so unstable right now. And you're going to go ahead and bet 30 years worth of future taxes
Man.
on something that you want right now. And that's where I wonder where these ideas all get hatched at, right? I'm like, where do these ideas come up at? That we need $1.4 billion for high schools, and we need $450 million for Midland College. I wonder where those they don't come out of thin air. So somebody's pushing for them.
And they keep coming every year. Every couple of years, they got a new bond they're going to introduce. It's simple. People
Mhm.
want to be in debt. They don't mind being in debt to impress their neighbors. They don't even like them or talk to them. So that's the mindset people have in the day and age we live in. Me, I took the Dave Ramsey class in my church. Debt is dumb. Cash is king. Well, Christ is king, but you know how they say cash is king on the
Yes, sir.
out here while we're doing business. So I think this is a horrible plan. It's 30 years, maybe 40, and they can also raise the numbers. They have it written in the actual bond. It's pretty scandalous. With that, I'll give you the final words. Go ahead, Kevin. What would you tell the voters, the citizens of Midland that are concerned? And you shouldn't feel bad that you're critiquing Midland and the leaders because you care. It's better that you will sit here and say what you're saying and hurt someone with the truth than kiss them with the lie. You see what I'm saying? So I commend you
Yeah.
for coming forward and speaking because I mean our blood, sweat, and tears is in the oil field. It's in the desert out here. We have the right to speak up. Now, when you move from Fresno, California, and you're a professor here pushing these weird ideologies, and you want to spend my money, I think that kind of person really don't have no say so. I think you have say so. I have say so, and I think Stan and our people, our fellow Midlanders, we have say so because we've been here and we live this life in this desert, getting this precious oil out of the ground. With that, final words. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here. So, yeah, and back to circling full back to Ranchland Hills, I'm afraid that what's going to happen with the general population is exactly what happened with Ranchland. Ranchland was affordable for the working guy, for guys like me. I drive a 2005 F-250. The reason is because, I wanted to make sure my kids had what they needed. And back to the Dave Ramsey stuff, I don't like debt, but it forced us out. We had an option that we could go and enjoy what little green space Midland had, and it was affordable. The next step up was $40,000 to join, and so there's a big gap. The people at Midland Country Club, Odessa Country Club, Green Tree, those people are the ones by a large part that are trying to get these big bonds passed, and they can do it because it doesn't impact them. Well, the same thing's going to happen to the citizens, right? You're just making the gap between the haves and the have-nots even bigger with the passage of these big bonds like this. I think they ought to take a more measured approach, a more pay-as-you-go approach.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't have a 30 or 40-year payout on it just seems ridiculous to me when you got a volatile industry like oil and gas that, again, is such a blessing and a curse for everybody that's got roots here. And I'm afraid that you cut off enough roots and eventually the tree's going to die. And that's my biggest fear.
Amen. With that, y'all, we thank you for your time. I hope you make an informed decision when you do go vote, and I hope you do go vote. Kevin, with Save Ranchland Hills, you have the Facebook page, correct?
Yes, sir. It's still up. We've renamed it since the battle is over, but the name of it now is Remember Ranchland Hills and Save Tax Dollars.
Awesome, Kevin. I appreciate what you do. I met you in person. You bought me lunch. It was an amazing meeting. I've spoken to you. I've dealt with you and Stan and everybody else, and it's been an honor to work with you. I know you have a heart for the community of West Texas, as do I. Stan, everybody else that's involved. I hope we win because all we want is the betterment of our community. And I don't think, or I know that there's nothing good about going into debt, especially over $1 billion with interest over 30 to 40 years. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And with that, God bless everybody that's watching, and we're out of here.
Well said, my friend.